Welcome to another episode of Connecting Conversations, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined today by, in my opinion, a bit of a brave warrior around this earth, and that is Jamila Periera. Jamila, thank you so much for joining Connecting Conversations with Cohesia Connect. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. It was quite difficult to arrange this meeting, but here we are today.
We got there.
We did. The schedules were not doing what they were supposed to do, but here we are, and I'm grateful for that.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. We met at a really great event called People Like Us, and you were one of the keynote speakers. And what really attracted kind of me to you and just your story that you shared on that day was so powerful. But rather than kind of mess it up myself, it would be great if you could maybe give a bit of an introduction to yourself and the work that you do, so that our listeners are just kind of really braced for the good stuff that I know that's going to come in this conversation.
Lovely. So, hi everyone. My name is Jamila. I am a freelance writer. So, write about culture, gender politics, identity politics, and anything that might include the diaspora and our experiences overall, not just within the UK, Europe, but beyond. Born and raised in Lisbon. My parents are from Guinea-Bissau, so I'll entitle myself as a Bissau-Guinean woman, quite proud. I've been living in the UK for 12, 13 years now. And so far, so it's been good. It's been okay, but I think I've had my time. So you'll see me soon, traveling away, going away, not coming back. Yeah, so that's pretty much me. I've been writing for 3 years now, have a degree in international relations, and I just saw that politics is life. But then understanding that politics is life, but how it impacts us as well, not just in a sense of what we eat, how we are, but also how we interact with each other. And that's me.
I love that. Tell us a little bit about kind of just your recent work. And I think this was something that really attracted me to your stories because you mentioned that there is such diversity in where you are based, where your family originates from an ethnic cultural background, and also where you've been living and growing into different cultures. What that's been like experiencing all these interesting kind of dynamics that come as a result of all of those diversities as a family.
I think it was a bit challenging at first, especially because I didn't have the understanding that I have today on how family dynamics work and how politics actually affects the way we perceive it, the way we perceive others as well. Especially coming from a country like Guinea-Bissau that I adore, but it's still a baby country. So 50 years of independence. So if anyone, you would see that that is the baby comparing to other nations. So seeing how that impacted the population and how that thrives through generations, not just with myself, but even with my nieces, my parents, our grandparents, and how there's so much work to do still. And to be privileged enough to had studied the history of my country, understanding, having to dive into politics of decoloniality and just Orientalism and all these notions that we are ingrained in when you study politics and history and all these
Mm,
things.
mm, mm.
Being able to break all of that down, dismantle what I have to do, and just being able to carry myself in a way that not only represents what I stand for, but what my country should be standing for, and all the potential that it has as well. So it's been an interesting journey. I'm not gonna lie.
It would be so good to hear, like just a bit more about, like, you've clearly got a very strong passion about this very impact of how this wider political diaspora type situation for families impacts the relationship between the parents and the children that are then raised in communities that are not where their parents originate from. And I've heard you share such a lot of that, and you speak about that in your writing too. Could you share a little bit about that and why that was so important for you to kind of touch on?
I think that we've all got into this phase of there's a new facet of relationships, especially with the rise of social media and globalization. We've seen a massive shift of how we interact with each other, especially our families. And due to the same shifts that we've seen, there comes this understanding. I think I had it on my early 20s, but some people might have it a bit later, that our parents and the family, there's just human beings. And like the
Mm.
same way I'm trying to grapple with capitalism and all these things coming at me right now, so are they. But I think for us as children, it's a bit harder to be as vulnerable and see
Mm.
them like that. So the same empathy that we have for a friend that is struggling mentally with something going on, or a relationship, or what it is that they're struggling with, we don't give that to our parents. We don't give that kind of sympathy and just giving them the time to just settle down and explain what's going on. But again, do they have the understanding of what's going on? Because, like I said, we are privileged enough to have loads of tools right now to make us understand. You have social media, you have just newspapers, you got books, and you got all of this. And we have a luxury that they didn't have as well, time. Even though we think we have time, they didn't have none of that. So they had to grapple with racism, discrimination, and all these things going on, and they still had to take care of us. Well, at the moment, there's many of us choosing, for example, not to have kids. So even though we have our plates full, it's still quite easy to digest in certain things. And I think whether it's friends or confidence or sensitive humans like us, we ought to accept that they're humans and just be a bit kinder with them, I would say.
I love that you've described that. And I think it just automatically makes me think, also as someone that shares kind of like an immigrant journey, that my parents from a different country, and then the adjustment, but myself and my sister being raised here. So culturally, we are very, very kind of anglicized, UK British in mindset. And that adjustment has had time because we integrated, because we had to through school, and you're exposed to, this is the frame of how we do order in this nation. This is the frame of how we see ourselves and how you learn how to cue. And we tend to be on the passive side of aggression rather than we're confrontational, which was cultural concepts that I actually picked up being in the playground or in the school through the teachers and how they systematically taught us, which was quite different to, I think, what my parents experienced. And like you said, they were kind of navigating something very different than what we were. And there's a lack of, I would say, and I'm very guilty of this, and I've got to hold my hand at first, a lack of grace and tolerance to actually give them the space. Because I was a child, that's an easier transition. Coming as a full-blown adult, you've lived fully a life somewhere else. The cultural concepts here are a massive, adjustment and transition to do. And then you still need to find and make your way. And you have got big responsibilities of children that you're taking care of. Why do you think that we lack this grace for our parents? And we are, like you said, we have more time. We should actually have a bit more knowledge because we are aware of what's going on. But why do you think that this still kicks in for us? Why are we so intolerant and impatient with them?
I think it's that notion of understanding that our parents have it all together and that the adults, I think it's what I see with my niece now. She assumes that my life is perfect. So their representation of, oh, my auntie, she travels and she does all of this and she's a writer, da, da, da. But she doesn't know what's going on behind the scenes. So it's that front that they're putting up for us. It's even though, because you don't want the kids to see what's going on, like all the stress and all of this. Of course, you want them to have like a harmonious environment. But
Yeah.
because they're so good at doing that, we just assume that they should know what they're doing. And also, I think it's really, because I'm a second generation of immigrants within my family, and my niece is the third. And although we try to adapt to the environment we're in, our culture and history has carried us here, right?
Mm,
And I disregarded the fact that my parents had to live a baby country and having to move to their colonizer country and having to adapt there. So, in my perception, born and raised there, I assumed that their level of livelihoods should be the same as other parents that have always lived there. They're from the
interesting.
land. And I've
Yeah.
only understood this when I moved here. So I remember the first time I went to Portugal, where my mom used to live on holidays, the first time I returned after living to the UK. And I just hugged her and I cried so much. And I said, I'm so sorry. Because I didn't understand how difficult it was to be an immigrant, to be black, to be a woman, and having to try to succeed. And she was a mother too. And it's so hard. And it doesn't only impact how we navigate society, but also how we see each other, because
Yeah.
there's cultural differences. And they just speak louder and louder because it's a completely shift of realities. The amount of times I've been labeled as, oh, Jamila, too straightforward, or Jamila, you aggressive, or Jamila, this and that. And being here, me understanding that it's just cultural differences because I was raised on being straightforward and go straight to the point. And now I'm just a bit more delicate. Because like you said, it is a whole journey having to adapt to the environment you're in. And clearly I was no different. So for many parents, like, I think that the concept of parenthood derives from their internalized experiences, their cultural norms, and
Yeah.
sometimes it's just not sustainable. And they don't know this; it's not sustainable because some parents do not give us the space to speak about what works for us and what doesn't. Nowadays, I do have that freedom with my parents, and
Mm.
sometimes it doesn't work out, but they try. They know I'm special, so
In only the good
like they
way.
say,
In only the good way.
yeah, I'm
Yeah.
the like my brother say I'm the villain in the family, but I take it. It's okay because someone needs to be that outspoken and just being able to put their feelings out there. And despite the systemic social constraints and like all the low expectations that people have towards us and them, they're recognizing our community as superheroes, and we should literally hold them for that. But in the
Mm.
end of the day, we also need to understand that again, they need to take a step back and analyze their behaviors and how that impacts us. Because I don't think that they put on traumas willingly and nilly because they're just having fun. Again, cultural differences and not understanding that certain things that don't work out. Yeah,
I
that's
think
me.
that was super insightful and just so grateful that you laid that out as candidly and honestly as you can. And I imagine I am already feeling that I resonate with so much of that complexity, but also like others who may share similar stories, but there's never really been space to discuss it. And I think you and I have chatted about this like outside of this recording, but there is definitely kind of like it really shatters the concept that a lot of, you know, immigrant experiences are kind of linear. There's just this one block of it's one way, but no one really like I think has a comprehension in the way that I feel you have now brought to the fore with your writing and just with your presence, and given the opportunity for this issue to be kind of seen and visible, and how much more it needs to be, I think, heard, because it will help others to empathize. Like, it's one thing to I'm you know, and I say, as someone who feels that they're dangling middle lines, it's like I am from something different, but I'm also from very much here where I've been raised, and I'm part of this too. And that's sometimes not a very easy kind of concept for others looking in, who are kind of fed specific stereotypes or boxes about what these, you know, diverse groups should look like, what these communities are experiencing. How can we kind of overcome that? What should we be doing to create more space, do you think, for conversations like this and others who may resonate with, you know, figuratively speaking, these types of challenges?
I think it's really hard because I have this joke saying I only understood I was a black woman when I moved to the UK.
You are
And
not the
people
first
think,
person to say that.
yeah,
You are not the
and
first
people
person to say that.
think it's a negative thing, but for me, it's not negative
Mm.
because I kind of say I grew up in a bubble, understanding that, okay, I'm Portuguese and I'm so proud and all of this. And if anyone says, oh, you're from Bissau, Guinea-Bissau, and I'm like, no, I'm not. My parents are from there. I am not. But
Interesting.
growing up here and understanding their experience when it comes to immigration and what they had to go through, and the fact that I had to go through that so much that my mom says, oh my God, I can't believe I let you guys go. Because me and my brother were living here. And it kind of dwelled on me the fact that growing up on this bubble pushed me away from my heritage, my culture, and understanding a bit more of my parents. So I usually say as well, I only met them as people about 3, 4 years ago, because before that we didn't have
Wow.
yeah, because before that we didn't have open conversations about how it was growing up in Guinea-Bissau. So my mom gets quite defensive until today. My dad is an open book. So, and then sitting down with other family members and asking certain questions, it's like, oh, okay, now I understand you. And what I mentioned on the panel as well, the fact that I wished they got divorced earlier. But now understanding how the relationship was molded, okay, yeah, they should have got divorced earlier, but there's cultural norms and stuff there that literally hindered that progress. And the fact that they saw each other through quite hatred lens that impacted
Right.
us and the way we relate to them. But knowing that, again, cultural norms, ethnic backgrounds, everything was just influencing the way they navigated with each other. But for me, I think that nowadays we can easily see the socioeconomic impact, political impact on each
Mhm.
other's relationships, and it's the basis for every relationship. But I also think that we overlook how powerful these circumstances are, and it kind of set expectations that what we had. It kind of set the expectations that we had for our parents, and also the expectations they had for us. And so we now see a lot of families that migrated from the
Mhm.
motherland to Europe, creating better opportunities, but they also were met with shards of poverty, inequality, racism, violence, and all of that combined with the cultural and ethnic backgrounds. This has molded them. So how can we just come and start throwing stones? Because no one is perfect. So I think that it takes a lot of maturity and understanding and a lot of therapy
Yeah.
to get
Yeah.
to get these kind of things going in these conversations. Because for them, it's not easy, I think to try and see that the kids are judging them, or because I know my mom gets quite defensive when it comes to certain conversations, but just trying to be like a soft pillow for them. I think that's what we need to
Mm.
do. Yeah, if necessary and if available, because certain parents do not even give the space. But if you see like a bit of a lifeline, go for it. That's what I would say.
And that's a big ask, I would say. Like, I don't know. I think if it's become, say, for example, this cycle of, like you mentioned, one of your parents tends to get defensive when you start to challenge or question how they think, or you are kind of clashing on or agreeing on something that you want to do that impacts, say, for example, the family. If you're in a cycle of that all the time, it just continues, like hurt, offense, hurt, offense. It will take someone to say, stop the madness. Let's just take a step back. What's going on here? And I think that's a big ask. And I think you mentioned this earlier, and I can see for me personally where that tension might lie. When as children we grow up and we look at our parents as literal superheroes. They see everything, they know everything, they do everything. Like anything that is possible, that is, beyond, human, superhuman powers, our parents have that in our minds. And this transition of, like, I'm seeing you as an actual person now. And I'm seeing, like, actually, wow, you went through so much, but we are so far apart because my mindset is so far from what you've had to navigate, because our experiences are so far away. And in that place, and from what you've described is, do we have the courage? Do we have the maturity to be okay to say, I'm not going to fall into that kind of, hamstering kind of motion, and just be brave enough to say, look, I see you as a person. I just want to respect you. I want to give you the grace, because this is hard. And you mentioned, like, coming from an African background, I think that respect and dynamic thing would have been another challenge in terms of, am I okay with my kid actually creating a space for me to kind of go through therapeutic progress together to amend this relationship?
Mm-hmm.
That's super complex. And I wonder, for anyone that comes across this conversation, like, what does that look like for them? It sounds like yours is super constructive. And I feel like that's goals for me, the way you're like, I can be a pillow for you, and it doesn't stop you from being my mum or my dad, loving and respecting you. And you're not going to lose anything if you show me the vulnerability of actually the challenges that you've had that I've not had to experience. I think that's going to take so much. What can we do to figure that out if it's not something that looks plausible right now, or we've not had the kind of the outcome that you are now experiencing with your parents?
I think that one, we need to deconstruct the whole notion of typical Black parenting, because a lot of us have that. Oh, it's
Yeah.
just African parents. Typical. So even the small memes that we see, and you see like 12,000 likes because we all been through that. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's the whole thing of simplifying their humanity through typical Black parenting, but that kind of overlooks the emotional necessities and then that we have, and denies them space and validation and also accountability. Because like you said, it's it's a fine line to having to thread through that. I've had silent moments with my parents several times, because if something's not working for me, I thought I would have to be the person that I would have to stay there and be the punching bag when they're feeling some type of way about life. But then I understood that I can excuse myself from those situations. And I think that a lot of people don't have that understanding yet. Regardless, it's a family member, a parent, a sibling, whoever it is. If you feel like you're being attacked and you're not being appreciated in any kind of space, you need to excuse yourself and then reconsider if you want to reconnect with that person. So I think that there's that notion of it's a parent and you have to stick that, and you don't. So the typical black parenting, it's often portrayed in the media and Western societies as ineffective and poor. But again, people forget to humanize them, and everything's political. Parents go through a lot of stuff and so on. But we need to see and choose if they're literally worthy of the time, worthy of that space, worthy of being the soft pillow from both ways. Do you know what I mean? So for me, it's been a journey because my parents are really difficult and they're traumatized. They just don't know yet, but they're traumatized. So having to go through literally trying to make them understand these things, it's really hard because I feel like no one told me being an adult would be parenting my parents. No one told me I would have to do this. And now here I am, and I feel like I'm clueless and lost. Um, it's been really, really hard. So for anyone trying to navigate this right now, I would just say be patient, be kind, be there to a certain extent, because your well-being, it's always the priority, regardless of who you're dealing with. And as you're going through this, don't mind taking small breaks, long breaks. Just see what works for you. Just see what works for them. And always remind them that being defensive, passive aggressive, or however they feel, this is only a reaction and a projection of deeper layers within them. It's not your fault.
And we may never really understand or know about.
Exactly.
It just
Yeah,
reminds me of
definitely.
it's a common meme that comes across that says, like, when you see someone, always be kind because you don't know the battles that they're fighting on the inside. And sometimes we forget
Exactly.
to reserve that space even for like very close family members, more so like probably our parents too. And that's a tough kind of tension to lean in. But I think the more and more we become as a generation, so much more socially aware, so much more accessible in terms of there's no social taboo in us accessing resources for well-being, accessing resources for therapy. It's lost that means something quite different, I think, for our parents' generation. And we're
Mm-hmm.
in the space where, okay, I can get tools and I can be healthy and whole, and there's these things I can do about it. Sometimes I feel like for our parents' generation, that was not something that's a luxury that they didn't have. And I think you alluded to that earlier. How would you say in this process, and again, I'm just so in admiration, and you've made a conscious and intentional effort that you want to navigate this with your parents, and it's been challenging. And you probably have choice to, I don't actually have to engage in this and I don't want to. And for some families or some young people, that's probably a choice that they felt that they had to make. How has this impacted you and your sense of self-identity? Because our parents are such a huge imprint into that overall outcome of us as humans, as citizens participating in our world.
A lot of therapy at this point out, I'm thinking. That's been the main thing. A lot of reading, a lot of self awareness, and a lot of moments speaking to myself in the mirror. People might think I'm going crazy, but I do sit
Why?
down,
It's not
look
given
at
enough
them.
credit. You have to talk to yourself.
I do, because I remember my mom doing this when I was a kid, and I thought it was weird. I always thought it was weird when she did that. And I'm like, what are you doing? She's like, I'm talking to your mom, to her mom, my grandma at this point. My grandma was still alive at this point. So I'm like, what do you mean?
Okay.
So for her, it wasn't talking to herself. She needed to talk to her mum. So whenever she felt like she was
Wow.
struggling with something, she would talk to her mum. And I said, but how are you talking to her? She's listening. No matter where she is listening. And that
That's
always
so
creeped me out a
beautiful,
bit when I
actually.
was a kid. But now I do that because it's so important. So for me, it is now being able to pick and choose my battles, including those within my childhood and the relationships that I had with my families, trying to see if it's actually worth it.
Mm.
As painful as it is, not every bone is worth picking. And I know that I don't have children right now, but if I did, I would make sure that I would be shielding them from any adult problems, because assuming that they won't remember is a serious serious misjudgment, and I don't want my children to be aware of my partners or my wrongdoings on a relationship level. I'm probably going to give them some kind of trauma, and that's okay, I think. Sorry, guys. But hopefully, they'll be facing problems that match their age, not problems that they shouldn't be addressing, which happened to me and my siblings, having to deal with a lot of stuff that I thought, this is nothing to do with me. This is none of my business. Like, what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
So today, to be able to tell my parents that I went through all these things, and even though it pains them, just so they can self-reflect on why I act a certain way, why my brothers act a certain way. For example, we have this it's a small word we call each other. So in Portugal, which is manu, which is brothers, but it's a dearing term. Manu and mana. Mana is for girls, manu for boys. And we never called this. So you see everyone calling this to their siblings, and we never did this. And I always thought, like, why don't we call each other this? Like, it's so weird. Like, we don't hug, we don't kiss. I never see my parents kissing. Like, they don't. Like, there's so many like lack of affection
Wow.
moments. And now I'm a really affectionate person. And this year I end every call with my family, oh, I love you. And then if I don't say it, I start doing a tantrum. Why are you not saying I love you? Like, what's wrong with you? Like,
I
why is it so
demand that you
weird?
love me. Yes.
Exactly. And my brother was saying, why are you always asking for this? It's like, because we didn't have this growing up. And now I'm an adult. I'm making the conscious choice of letting you know that you are loved.
Wow.
And I do the same with my parents. So even my mom, like, I always say I love you. She's like, there you go again. And now she says it all the time. And I love it. I just like I get so happy for it. And even with my friends, I do exactly the same. But I've noticed that I have some friends that don't say it and they grew up in the same kind of environment as me. So not having the ability to show affection, to go that extra mile and just pushing them to do better. And I also think that, like I said earlier, we tend to forget that we have the resources and the tools and the emotional intelligence to have meaningful conversations that perhaps weren't being had back then. So we can build children's lives through a clean slate, do our best, not project traumas. And if you feel like you acted wrong or you did something wrong, apologize. Say sorry at the exact same moment.
Yeah.
I've had instances with my niece that she was getting on my nerves. And I just like shouted. And out of the blue, I'm like, oh my God, why did I shout? And I go to bed and I'm thinking about that shout for like 3 hours. I'm thinking, why am I still thinking about it? Why did I just go and say sorry? So then I was like, babes, I'm so sorry. So what are you saying for? Sorry for us. I screamed at you. I'm sorry. She's like, it's fine. I was like, no, it's fine because I didn't have to scream at you. Why did I? It's such a minor thing. Do you know what I mean? So just trying to, again, pick your battles and choose wisely how you interact with others because you never know how that's going to impact them in the long term. And I think that our generation is excelling. Like, we're doing really well by destroying patterns and changing them for the best. So I think that accepting our parents' true colors, we're also acknowledging that they're people just like us that deserve some kindness and also distance if it's needed.
I love that. And I think I can think of like a perfect way to kind of come to a close of this incredible conversation. And I would say, like, one piece of advice you would leave for someone who's willing and wants to get to kind of the spaces that you're exploring and succeeding in, what would you say would be a piece of advice, kind of like that first step that they can take?
Don't settle for less and don't labor in poor harvests. There's no point. We demand more. We meant to demand more, and we should demand it as well, addressing everything. And if the healing process is yet to begin, take your time. It took me 25, 26 years to know my parents, and it was worth it. It was so worth the wait. It's okay. I don't regret it. This city, even knowing myself, because knowing them impacted the way I see myself and how I interact with certain things. Yeah, try and analyze them first, and then try and analyze yourself, and just take your time. Literally, be kind with yourself. I think that's the biggest thing, because sometimes we are forced to take some decisions that are focused on our well-being, and it kind of pains us a bit to having to take certain steps to that. But it's worth it. It's worth it, especially when you see the growth and the patience, the resilience, and everything that you achieved along the way.
And also, like, it greatly benefits you. It greatly benefits you in terms of you become whole. when you have understanding, the things that you feel like that have been holding you hostage, where there's been real challenge there and has traumatized you in just terms of the dynamic between parents and children, getting to that space of understanding, seeing them in a grace space releases you so much. And it also means that you have a right and you've been given the tools that it doesn't have to get passed on to another generation. Jamila, this has been just so incredible. I will make
Thank you so
sure,
much.
please, can you share with us kind of links to your work? We'll probably be putting that on our kind of caption with this podcast, but it's been such an incredible opportunity to have you speak and just share some very important needed insights in terms of, we don't have to settle for less. We can actually have great relationships, and let's start right at home before we start looking outside. So thank you so much, Jamila, and all the
Thank
best with the work
you.
that you're doing. We love it.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure having, like I said, I never get interviewed, so thank you. This has been
More
so
of that to come,
exciting.
hopefully.
Exactly. Hopefully, less. Yes, yes. So thank
Thank
you
you
so
so much.
much. It was a pleasure having me here. I'll send all the socials later. Yeah, so you can find me. I'm the worst with LinkedIn. I'm so naughty. Yeah, I've got so many messages. I don't reply. But yeah, so really, really bad. So yeah, if you do want to find me, just go on Instagram, Millie_GP, and you can find me there. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, and take care.
Thank you so much.